Nice. All
Sounds
right,
like
let's go.
Jim Norton thing. This is Live from the Table, a Comedy Cellar affiliated podcast coming at you on Sirius XM 99 Raw Dog. Yes, indeed. And the Laugh Button Podcast Network. This is Dan Naturman, along with Noam Dworman, the owner, the proprietor.
Hello.
Of the world, he's in a mood today, folks. Of the world famous Comedy Cellar, we have with us also Periel Aschenbrand. She is our producer, and the term producer.
She produces a new hit animated series called Stupid, Stoopid. It's an animated series. By the way, she calls it Stupid at the Comedy Cellar. We should discuss that. But go ahead. That wasn't authorized, but go ahead.
It wasn't?
Well, a lot of people use the
No.
Comedy Cellar name for various things. Dave Juskow has a podcast, I believe, with the
That's
Comedy Cellar
authorized.
name. That's authorized. Okay.
Yeah.
And of course, there is also Nicole Lyons, who is a behind-the-scenes woman.
Do you use the name Comedy Cellar or anything you do privately, Nicole?
I don't think so. I keep it under the radar.
She is a wizard. Sound is not an easy thing. People have told me that sound is really, really tricky, even more so than video.
Yeah, sound is tricky.
But she does video also.
Well-
She does.
Is your Twitter handle Nicole Comedy Cellar Lions? What's
No, I'm gonna lock that down though.
She's funny.
Um,
Do you do stand-up, Nicole?
Nope, not a bit.
No, Nicole, well, she's very shy, and we know that because I often will ask her questions on air.
Yeah,
or
we should ask this about Periel. It just occurred to me. Why did you use the name Comedy Cellar?
I didn't. It's Stupid at the Cellar. It's on the. It's on the stoop. It says Comedy Cellar. It's a drawing of the background. What do you think? I'm like trying to exploit the name in an unauthorized way. What are you getting?
You know what, Periel? I don't know what the right answer there is because it would almost because I always make fun of you.
Yeah.
Like it would be like, no, you're probably not trying to use the name Comedy Cellar. It probably didn't occur to you that might be helpful to you. So go ahead.
No, but it's literally on the stoop, right? Like it.
Yes, but there's a reason you use the Comedy Cellar stoop, because the Comedy Cellar has some name value, and because a lot of well-known comics work here. So the Comedy Cellar backdrop is important to the project.
Yes, of course, but it's also it was taped here.
It says Stupid at the Comedy Cellar
Where?
on your YouTube description.
Oh yes, okay. I thought
You meant that.
Well, it is at the Comedy Cellar though.
Stupid at the Comedy Cellar. That's
So
what you meant
should
by
it
Stupid at the
say?
Comedy Cellar.
What should it say?
I should say Stupid
Mm-hmm.
is a new bite-sized talk show style. That's right. Set on the stoop of the world famous comedy. But what? Listen, the reason this came to my attention is because everybody's complimenting me on my new show.
Oh well, that's great. It is your new show. I mean, it's
No, it is not.
okay.
Well, you were on episode 1.
I mean,
from what I understand, that according to you is the best episode there is.
It is the best one, but I'm saying that people think it is a Comedy Cellar production.
okay. Well, it kind of is a Comedy
Well,
Cellar.
no,
production.
No, it is not a Comedy Cellar production.
I mean, it was produced here.
No.
No.
You
Okay.
mean in the real estate? Is that what you mean?
No, I mean as the setting. Like it was.
Yes, that doesn't make it a Comedy Cellar production.
Okay.
No more than if I produce porn in Washington Square Park, it's a New York City production.
Wait, do you want me to change the name? I'm just not really sure what you're getting at.
Nicole, you want to take this?
I'll pass.
Well, she was authorized to use the location.
Yes.
So that, if not implicitly, that somewhat implicitly.
No, she was authorized to use the stoop.
And you knew
the stoop.
Well,
yeah.
I think you
Wait, did I-
you knew that the Comedy Cellar name would be in there somewhere. Since
I really
since
didn't.
she's using
I
yours.
never knew it would be called Stupid at the Cellar or Stupid at the Comedy Cellar. I never knew that. No, I didn't.
Well, I think I hate to say that you should have known, because it's filmed here and it's using all of your comics.
They're not my comics. They're comics.
Well,
Well,
They're
but
more-
the reason they're here is because of you. The reason they're
that's right. That's why you do it here. But that's different than putting it into the name of the thing.
well, I think you should have predicted it.
Do you want me to change it?
No, it's okay.
Oh my god.
I'll allow it.
How about this?
Yeah.
If we sell it, you're part of it.
No.
No?
Don't Kanye West me into this thing. I'm not interested.
Oh my God, that is so rude.
I'm not sure what he meant by that.
I'm not sure what he meant by it
I meant
either.
it's don't try to appeal to my pecuniary interests.
I'm not. I'm saying I feel like to use something in an unauthorized way would be to be sneaky about it, or I shot something here without telling you and then use the name.
If somebody says to me, "Can I do some interviews with comedians on the stoop of the of 117 McDougal Street?" and I say yes, I don't realize when I do that I'm authorizing the name Comedy Cellar into the title of their
but
project.
again, I think you should have predicted that possibility.
Yeah, I didn't think about it. I
You
figured
should be one step ahead.
It didn't even occur to me. I mean, again, if you'd like me to change it.
I mean, the stoop of the Comedy Cellar is the whole selling point, is that this stoop is sort of, if not famous, it's iconic in a certain way.
Yeah, that was the whole point
It
of
was
the
sort
show.
of the point of the show.
Well, it wasn't sort of the
I
point.
thought the point of the show was the comedians.
Well,
Yeah, but the stoop at the Comedy Cellar and the comedians both together.
and the comedians from the Comedy Cellar. It's
Nicole,
not
you sure you want to take this one?
Actually, I do, because the title isn't Stupid at the Comedy Cellar. That's just the social titles, right, Periel? The actual
Well,
title
the
is
distinction
just
without a difference. But I mean, social is pretty important.
Yeah, but the series title is just Stupid, no?
Yeah, the series title is
Yeah,
stupid.
stupid. But then it says at Stupid at the Cellar, and then the description is stupid, and it says, but then it says, except that the title in the description is Stupid at the Comedy Cellar.
Yes. Or
All-
I mean,
in
or
all-
on the
in all-
stoop of the world famous Comedy Cellar. Is that?
Well, anyway, no, I think, I don't know what that noise is, but I think,
Yeah, set on the stoop of the world famous Comedy Cellar.
Well, that's different. I'm looking at the YouTube description. I guess
Oh.
your branding is a little ad hoc, Yeah.
If there's something you want me to change, tell
Well,
me and I'll change it.
No, I think I'm okay with it.
um,
It's just because I say I'm okay with it. It doesn't undermine my point. Go ahead.
before we get to Andrew Doyle, who is coming in a bit, we can discuss the fusion breakthrough, if it is a breakthrough, or Periel's recent show at Stand Up New York. Noam, you pick the topic.
The fusion breakthrough and Periel's show.
Okay, well, first we'll do the fusion breakthrough.
Okay.
Well, apparently, for the first time in history, I'm no physicist, but they succeeded in creating more energy from a fusion reaction than the energy that was required to ignite the fusion reaction.
Now Periel's show.
Okay, so I guess that's it. But
I'm kidding.
but I'm told that
Even Nicole laughed at that.
I'm told there's a little more to it than that. That like the overall, it was still, they used more energy, but
No, that is what it is, but they have to scale it up. I heard some outrageous number. They have to bring the temperature to 180,000
hotter
degrees,
than the
something
sun. I
crazy
think.
like
it's
that.
like literally hotter than the sun. They bombard this little pellet of, I guess, hydrogen with laser beams, and eventually it fuses. The hydrogen fuses into helium, I guess, and then energy is released. But anyway, this is supposed to be an important step, but still maybe decades away from a workable fusion reaction.
It's still amazing. It's still
Well, I don't know what to
amazing.
make of this, because I remember like 20, 30 years ago, they were saying, the cold fusion. They were talking about cold fusion, and
This is hot.
I'm going to curb my enthusiasm, because oftentimes they will make these sorts of announcements, and we'll see where it goes. But obviously, fusion would be a big deal, and I think
Thank God it happened in America. Thank God. Maybe that's a little over the top to say, but I mean,
well, this certainly makes up for Trump and
I've been
a lot of the anti-American sentiment will be washed away if we can pull this off.
I've been fearing for a while the day when the tomorrow will no longer happen in America. You know, this was something that I had thought about years ago when I was talking about running for Senate back then. And like when we didn't want to go to the moon anymore, and I remember saying, like, you think you don't want to go or to other planets. So you think we don't want to do that until China does it. And then all of a sudden we realize, oh, shit, we're not the country that does it anymore. So I was very, very pleased about the RNA vaccines coming from America. And I'm very, very pleased that this fusion thing's coming from America. It's important for our, like, we don't have a nationality. We have a pride in our system and everything. Like this brings us together as a people. We need things like this.
Well, like I said, we're still. It sounds like we're still a long way off, and I'm sure people from all around the world will probably, just like the internet. I think the internet kind of got started here, but there were contributions.
Thank God for Al Gore. Al Gore.
Yes, he did. There were contributions from elsewhere, so this is probably going to end up being a global project when all is said and done.
Andrew.
If it comes to fruition, when it comes to fruition, we're talking about fusion. And we're just saying we're cautiously optimistic that maybe this is going somewhere.
Oh, you want to introduce him for us, Dan?
Should I put this on?
But he's English, so he's not quite as perhaps thrilled with
Well, the fusion story.
the fusion story happening in America.
Isn't it the biggest story ever, effectively? It means it will completely revolutionize and change the world. That's my understanding.
Ostensibly, yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, that's bound to be a good thing, right?
Yeah. Well, I was saying, in my own, ethnocentric, piggish American way, that I'm very happy it happened in America. And I was very happy that the RNA vaccine came from America, that I've been fearing for a long time, that day when the future would no longer happen in the United States, that it would start happening in China or something.
Yeah.
And I thought that'd be very damaging for the collective psychology of our country, that we need that more than other countries need these things.
You depend on national pride.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you very much do. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also a reminder, isn't it, that, to have faith in the capacity for humans to develop technology to deal with our problems. I think people forget that all the time. And when we talk about climate disaster and climate catastrophe, we forget that we will develop ways to
I'm with you.
Hopefully, of course, one day we will probably destroy ourselves.
Probably.
But with any luck, that day is
We'll all be dead
Is not
by that.
is not soon. Andrew Doyle is a comedian, writer, broadcaster, host of Free Speech Nation, a weekly television show on GB News. Has written 2 books under the guise of his satirical character Titania McGrath. Woke: A Guide to Social Justice, and my first little book of intersectional activism. I would like to add that one of your biggest fans is a dear friend of the Comedy Sellers, a man by the name of Louis Schaefer. I don't know if you've heard the name.
I work a lot with Lewis.
Okay, well, he said to me, your Andrew Doyle's coming on. Wow, he was very happy.
Yeah, Lewis is great. Well, Lewis is often on my show in London.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
Lewis was here just a few months ago visiting with his children. That he wanted them to see
he wanted
the
them
land
to
of
see
their
America.
forefathers.
Yeah, of course. I've met his children. Yeah,
And so welcome Andrew Doyle or Titania McGrath, your alter
But
ego.
also Jimmy Carr is a big friend of his. The comedian Jimmy Carr is a good friend of the Comedy Cellar. He emailed me. Were you CC'd on that email?
Yes.
And Brendan O'Neill. That's Brendan O'Neill, who's I haven't heard from him in a while.
No, well, he was the editor of Spiked, but he's now he's still writing for Spiked, but he's no longer the editor. But yeah, he's a friend of mine. Yeah.
A lot of like-minded people.
Yeah, it's nice to have that sort of.
So did you? I was looking something. Did you read? Did you introduce his book?
I certainly did.
Which one is this? There's three of them, I think. Which one? Which is the most recent one? The New Puritans is most.
Yeah, the new book is called The New Puritans.
Oh, I didn't read that one. But
Yeah.
The New Puritans,
which is a serious book. So that's not a satirical book. That's a book about what we call the critical social justice movement, the woke movement, whatever. That's
now
what
are you wearing a suit because you came from somewhere? You're going
I'm
somewhere?
massively overdressed. I'm
or
aware
you're
of
just
that.
overdressed for?
No, I'm going somewhere tonight. So a friend of mine is taking me to some posh dinner at the Manhattan Institute. I didn't know what that is, but that's why I have to dress like this. But I never wear this sort of thing.
I'm very partial to Paisley. I think that's I
The
like
tie is Paisley.
Yeah,
the
so the
suit
tie
is
works.
black, which, depending on what blog you read, is either a do or a don't.
Well, this only happened. I had to go to a posh dinner a few weeks ago, and I don't have a suit. So I had to run into a shop and get a suit within half an hour. So it was literally pick the only one that fit me, and that happened to be a black one. So that's what you're getting tonight. So
it's sharp.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
good.
You look good.
So I shouldn't have even apologized for it because I think it's good to make an effort.
Now, before we get into the politics and everything, I have a question for you. You do stand-up comedy.
I do. Yeah.
How come you have any interest in performing at the Cellar?
Yeah. Of course I do. Yeah. Yeah.
You haven't mentioned it. I know you mentioned it.
Well, I guess I just, because I'm only here for a few days and I'm sort of packing all this stuff in, and I didn't want to mess people around if I couldn't do it,
And you perform both as Andrew Doyle and as Titania, right?
No, I write scripts for Titania and an actress performs those. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't drag up.
Okay. So
I haven't got the shape. But I do stand up as myself.
the stand of it.
Yeah.
So I know it's like quite British, but so I don't know how that would. But I'm certainly ready to give it a whirl if you want to.
What, to do stand up here?
Sure.
Oh yeah, I'd love to. Of course. Yeah.
How long are you in town for?
I'm in town tonight and tomorrow night, and then I'm off Friday morning.
So maybe tomorrow
may
night.
not work. Well, okay, maybe tomorrow night.
What's that?
Well, I'm saying it's a little tight, but it's if you can fit it in, sure.
Well, if you can do it tomorrow night. Yeah, I can't do it tonight because I have to go. I have to go out somewhere.
So tomorrow night I've got the only thing I'm doing is the book launch from 6:30 to 8:30, but then I'm done.
All right, so we'll communicate.
Which I believe translates to 6:30 to 8:30.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So exactly. Yeah. Everything's different.
Separated by common language, as the old saw
do.
goes.
Will you be nervous to go on at the Cellar?
No, I mean I've only performed stand up in America once. And that was in LA. That was at Rob Schneider's show, and that's the only time I've done it in LA. And all I did was change some of the references that I knew would not translate here, and it seemed to still work.
It seems to still work.
So that's what I would do.
What references?
So, for instance, there are certain celebrity figures in the UK that people just wouldn't know here. So I
Dame Edna Everage, for example.
don't you presumably know Damon?
Well, very few of us do.
Yeah, and a couple of serial killers who I knew you wouldn't know, so I changed their names as well. Yeah. So,
Okay.
but it's doable.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get to it. You are you're a free speech absolutist,
I would say so. Yeah.
and you've been trumpeting this for quite a few years now.
Yeah.
And do you feel that the world is slowly coming around, like
I hope so.
to your point of view? What is your point of view? Maybe you can
My
just...
point of view is that freedom of speech is the seedbed of all of our freedoms. All of the freedoms emanate from that. And if we don't, and I also feel that it's not something we can take for granted once it's secured. So, society. I mean, our society is really unusual in that we have freedom of speech. That's not the norm. It's not the norm throughout history, and it's not the norm in the world today. So the idea that we should take it for granted and then allow this sort of gradual erosion of those liberties is terrifying to me. And I think you need to kind of fight and make the case for freedom of speech in every successive generation. You can't just say we've got it now and it's going to be here forever. You have to keep convincing people of the reasons why it's important. And there are all sorts of ways in which I think freedom of speech is under threat today, often from people who consider themselves to be liberals and progressive.
For instance.
But it's not just them. It also comes from the right. It's a non-partisan issue, and it shouldn't. Nowadays, I mean, what's happening more and more, which I find quite chilling, is that freedom of speech as a concept is being associated with being on the right, and that to me just goes to show that maybe certain prominent figures on the left have allowed this principle to slip away, and they have, in a sense, gifted it to the right. And it shouldn't be that. It should be something that we can all agree on, that we can all speak our mind without fear of prosecution.
Do you
harassment.
think the opponents of freedom of speech come mainly from the left these days?
I think they do.
Absolutely.
I mean, most of the people who are currently trying to advocate for a modification of the First Amendment would call themselves left-wing. They're saying that free speech should not encapsulate hate speech, and they think they want to carve out these exceptions for what they call hate speech, because no one knows what that means. And what it will mean is that whoever's in power gets to decide what is beyond the pale.
What is now, and in the United States, we have a First Amendment, which explicitly says freedom of speech will not be infringed. What's the tradition in England? There's no such...
We don't have a written constitution.
Right.
We don't have that. We didn't write it down.
You didn't write it down, but where is it? Is it just sort of part of the fabric of...
Yeah. Well, our constitution works in the way that it's uncodified, but it works on legal precedents, things that have gone before, which means that continually the judiciary and parliament have to interpret and come to a conclusion about what our constitution says about free speech. We do have free speech up to a point, but in the UK we do have hate speech laws enshrined in certain laws. So, for instance, there is a law called the 2003 Communications Act, which stipulates that if you post something online that is grossly offensive, you can go to jail for that. But grossly offensive could mean anything depending on who you talk to.
Is anybody doing time in jail for the what kind of things did they say?
Well, there's roughly, for a start, there's roughly 3,000 people a year arrested under that law in the UK. Not all of those goes to trial, and not all of those result in punishment, of course. But sometimes it's jokes. There was one guy who he made a joke about Madeleine McCann online, which was a joke that wasn't his. He just poached it from another website. He went to jail, I think, for 3 months.
That blows my mind. We have no concept.
Madeleine McCann's, isn't she a little girl from Spain?
She was kidnapped, and it was a very sensitive issue. And it was
Portugal, no?
Yeah, it was in Portugal, and obviously it's very upsetting, and it's good knowledge, good mathematical knowledge. But it was a kid. It was just some working class teenager who posted a joke, and the police just well, there are loads.
So
of examples of
conceivably, that joke that Louis C.K. made about the Parkland girl.
yes,
Was it a girl he made a joke about?
Was it
The
saying?
Parkland shooting.
No, he made one of the children.
yeah.
But anyway, in England, he could have gone to jail for that joke.
Yeah, they tend not to go after comedians, interestingly, but they could theoretically. I mean, that's a good example of they bought into the idea that jokes can normalize hate and spread hate. The Louis C.K. example is a good one because when that audio got leaked, the Independent newspaper, which is a UK newspaper, the headline was Louis C.K. mocks victims of school shooting, or it completely misunderstood. It took it completely at face value. And of course, that's the mindset of the judiciary and the police. And they think that if you make a joke about a murdered girl, you are in some weird way endorsing the act. Or let me give you another example. So there was a horrible tragedy in London, Grenfell Tower. You might have heard of there was a tower block in London and there was a fire. And the police and the services basically told people to stay inside, which was a mistake because they all burned to death.
Oh.
And then someone created a cardboard model of the tower and put little figures, painted it, and burnt it on their bonfire in their garden, filmed it, made jokes, laughed. So a sick, kind of distasteful joke. We can all agree on that, okay? Actual prison time. So was prosecuted because it was so offensive. So normally what happens with these jokes are comedians get left alone on the whole, and then people who make jokes themselves and post it online can end up in court. You know,
That's insane.
Of course,
And you wouldn't
everyone's
have
a
that here.
comedian with the advent of TikTok.
right?
You know, I mean, literally everybody's trying to be funny now.
But why
go-
should comedians haven't got a monopoly on humor?
Well, I wish they would. As I believe it was John D. Rockefeller had said, the only kinds of competition I hate are foreign and domestic.
well,
I'm with you 100%. I've had this fight with comedians. Well, they'll be judging someone. But I'm a comedian. I can say this. I say, what is that? Like a degree, a certificate,
Right.
or something?
I mean-
anybody can tell a joke.
yeah, humor is kind of essential to being a human
It's
being,
like-
right? So it's very weird to me that happens. It's
Well,
weird.
what's upsetting is that some people that aren't comedians seem to be doing it quite well.
They do, and that's upsetting to comedians. you
That's
know?
quite
Yeah, it's a
upsetting,
threat.
Oh, I mean, this is, digress, but I've always noticed as in my life as the owner of the Comedy Cellar, who's kind of funny, that if I would say something funny at the comedian table,
Yeah,
there are two types of comedians. There's some comedians who will generously laugh because it's funny.
Yeah.
And some comedians who will not laugh because as if to admit that someone who's not a comedian can be funny would detract from their own
Yeah. But
self-worth.
they don't laugh at each other either, though. Well, they don't in the UK.
Or sometimes they fake laugh at each other.
Oh, okay.
They'll slam their thighs, ha 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 ha, because
Oh, there's that. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Yeah.
But a lot of my experience when I was doing the open mic circuit years ago in London, and sometimes you get those. There would only be 3 or 4 people in the pub, and so most of the audience were other comics waiting to go on, and they
Yeah.
were the worst audiences. Because if you do a good gag, they're sitting there thinking, "Oh, I wish I'd have done that, or I would have done it differently," or that kind of thing. But it's not just humor, by the way. I should say there was a girl in England who got prosecuted in court, so taken to court, teenager, because she quoted some rap lyrics which had racial epithets within the lyrics.
N-word, I
Yeah, yeah. And she put that on Instagram, and she was doing it as a tribute to a dead friend. A boy had been run over, and it was his favorite song. So she put the lyrics online, but she ended up in court and got an ankle tag she had on her electronic tag. And so it's funny because the rapper didn't get in trouble for that, but she did.
Is the N-word in England, does it have quite the same power that it does in the United States? I mean, you don't have the same history that we do, of course, but
Yeah, I think. Well, yes, I think it's the taboo word.
it's pretty much got the same.
And it was their slavery,
Status.
which actually they're
Yeah.
more responsible for it than we are in a sense, because we had to grapple with it after we chased them out, but they instituted it, not us.
Well, the British.
Yeah,
But the British also ended it, of course.
Yeah, over there, but they,
Well, they
no,
ended,
no,
they
worldwide.
ended it in Canada, which was still part of which is why the Underground Railroad ended in Canada.
Yeah, the Royal Navy spent over 100 years ending the transatlantic slave trade and actually, blocking ships from physically blocking. And the UK went into masses of debt doing so. We've only got out of that debt about 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So it's been a major campaign, the UK, and the abolitionists, people like Wilberforce and the
I don't know my history on this. I just know that the
But also,
American slave system was set up under the British.
most of your African descended population came voluntarily. Is that correct in England?
Mostly during the 60s and the Windrush generation, from the Commonwealth and countries like that. And of course, the UK government was actively seeking migrants. It was saying, we have a depleting workforce, and we want people to come from the colonies and the Commonwealth, welcome them in. And of course, those people did experience a great degree of racism because the country wasn't used to that kind of diversity. Things are a whole lot better now,
But do you think that the racial tension in England is less because that history is not the same history that we have?
I think it's different because you had a society where slaves were here. We had a situation where we were enabling and profiting from slave trading, but the slaves didn't end up working in the UK, and that's the big sort of difference.
I think there's something else, and then I want to get back to the free speech. I think that I noticed this when I was in Israel a couple weeks ago. The world is getting so small that the entire world is reacting to the N-word in the same way because we're just becoming one group. Years ago, I would go to Israel, and it was like going to a foreign country. Now I get there is Netflix and Amazon, and everybody knows the same references. It's really becoming one world, and I think these cultural exports are just very, very powerful. I don't think it matters so much what the history is. I think people are just adopting these views.
Yeah.
It's like one woke world.
Yeah.
Ooh, that could be the title of the next book.
One woke world. Yeah, it's nice.
So getting back to the free speech.
Okay.
It's got a certain ring to it. I think.
What is so we couldn't have you on at a better time. What is your take on the whole Twitter, Elon Musk, Twitter files, the importance of Twitter, tech censorship as opposed to private censorship, all of it?
Okay. I think in the digital world, social media platforms are the de facto public square and are incredibly important because this is where these major conversations take place. I mean, every sort of media commentator and political figure is on Twitter. This is where this stuff happens. And when you have big tech colluding with politicians to decide what can and cannot be seen, when you have them suppressing an article of one of the oldest newspapers in America, that's a big deal. I think it is a big deal. And I think it's really great, actually, that Elon Musk has, done this, come in and said, we're going to have free speech on the platform. And it's going to be messy and it's not going to be perfect. But it's going to be better than having a group of sort of 20-somethings in Silicon Valley getting to decide what newspaper articles I can read or what tweets I can read. And, I think it was a terrible situation for a long time. And I don't understand why people are pretending that Elon Musk is turning it into some sort of fascist hell site. It's not the case.
Yeah, I have a lot of complicated or, maybe contradictory views about the whole Twitter thing. First of all, Elon Musk, he's not helping his own case by tweeting out like really, flippant.
He's having fun with it.
Yeah, he tweeted. I saw recently something that he tweeted, "My pronouns are prosecute."
Prosecute Fauci,
yes.
and he implied that Paul Pelosi wasn't actually attacked. This kind of stuff is not stuff which is not on firm ground, including even the lab leak thing and the lying about gain of function research, which I think could likely be true. But he doesn't know that it's true. You can't be calling for his prosecution,
But I guess part of the point is that people should be free to tweet stupid things that aren't necessarily true. And, if you believe in free speech, then you believe in that as well. No,
I'm just saying, I agree with you. He can say whatever he wants. I'm just saying he's not really helping. I don't think it's smart strategy for him to become a troll. At the same time, he's trying to.
No, I agree. Strategically, it's unsound.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying.
But what I would say is, for what I can see, all that's really happened to the platform is that a lot of people who got kicked off for no good reason have now come back, and there is a broader range of opinions now being expressed on the platform. He has got rid of a lot of child pornography and child trafficking. He's really made an effort there, and that was something that Twitter just didn't do anything about for years. So, as far as I could see, there's no reason to get upset about it. Elton John tweeting about how he's leaving the platform because of all the disinformation. But what's he talking about? I don't know what he's talking about there, and neither does he, I don't think.
Nobody knows.
No, I mean, they sort of go along with a narrative.
I kind of did agree. I know Constantine, Kissin his last name? Yeah, disagrees. I kind of did agree with Sam Harris that Twitter is a private company.
Yeah.
And they can do what they want. I say that because when you own a company and you make these decisions, you presume that every decision in some way goes towards the bottom line.
Yeah.
And if you tell somebody they can't make a decision that they think is better for their own bottom line, if the government says that, then the government kind of has an obligation to step in and pay your bills. Like, you want me to let this, but I'm telling you, I'm going to lose my advertisers if I do that. So
Yeah.
now what are you going to do for me? So I think that complicates it. But on the other hand, Twitter shouldn't be lying about everything that they did. If Twitter was honest and saying, yeah, we make these policies up ad hoc and blah, 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 everything that we share. And by the way, we meet with the FBI every week.
Yeah.
The criticism would be so withering that would be enough to make them change their behavior. The combination of being a private company and this lying about what they were actually doing is, I think, what is so repulsive. And by the way, it could even be legally actionable. There's a concept of detrimental reliance. Like when people are, I mean, I know they're not paying for it, but they are relying on Twitter's claim that they're going to be treated in a certain even-handed way.
Yeah.
And I imagine you could come up with some legal action. Well, I assumed you were honest, so I opted to do something here as opposed to, and I lost money or whatever it is, and I'm suing you now because companies are often held liable for lying.
Yeah.
Twitter was lying.
Absolutely.
If Twitter charged 5 cents for the right to be on Twitter, there would definitely be lawsuits now,
Absolutely.
right? Because then they'd be responsible for their terms of service.
And I think that's what people are upset about, is the fact that they were not transparent.
Yeah.
You know, they had these terms of service that didn't mean anything. They were so nebulous. And they were routinely censoring people they disagreed with politically, and that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
And that's not acceptable. And I take your point about being a private company, but when you have, I mean, we do have antitrust laws when small groups of companies have significant power in any particular industry. You know, the social media landscape is dominated by people who are in ideological lockstep, multi-billion-dollar corporations. So there is a case to come in and intervene.
Well, the trust might be Amazon Web Services, the Apple Store and the Play Store,
Right.
which come together and seem to prevent Parler or any other.
They kicked Parler off, right? So they kept saying
that's not really Twitter's fault, right?
Build your own,
build
your own platform. And they did, but we're not going to let you use your own platform. You know, so it is a problem. And when they have political intrigue, when they're so closely connected with one political party, then it becomes a problem. It's a huge problem.
So what I think is the overall problem, and by the way, you know what's interesting is that there's this. Twitter is much less important than people make it out to be. The people who use Twitter think it's the be-all, end-all.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Tucker Carlson will go on Fox News and spread vaccine, quote-unquote, disinformation or misinformation to millions of people all at once that Twitter would never let on its air, on its site. And nobody can do a thing about it, and we survive it, right? I mean,
there's a fear of things being wrong, and I think this is a real problem. The idea that
I just mean that we're so worried that somebody will tweet something not true and 10,000 people will see it.
Well, so what if they do? If someone's putting out information that's not correct, then provide better information.
Right, I agree.
You know,
but the fear that this matters when we know that on the news, the same piece of information will be disseminated to millions and millions of people. Like, how can you possibly claim that this matters?
Well, what is it? Something like 20% of people are on Twitter, and something like 1% of those people are responsible for 10% of all the tweets or something. So it is, yeah. But like I say, it's all those people in the media and the politics and the opinion formers and all that kind of thing. And so that's why it does.
And it's so arrogant, right? They're not worried about themselves reading the misinformation.
Yeah.
They're worried about the deplorables, like that.
That's what it's all about. They're worried about the masses.
Yeah.
The masses are these sort of the great unwashed. You know, they can't be controlled. It's the same logic as we've got a group called the BBFC, which decide on the film certificates. You know, when a new movie comes out, they used to censor bits. They used to take bits out, and that's just a group of people, upper middle class people, sitting in their office saying, "We can handle these films. We can handle it." But the public, it's about mistrust of the public, mistrust of the people.
And let me tell you what I think. See if you agree with me. The big fear to me is that what they are doing is stigmatizing the whole idea of free speech. It's not so much that Twitter's censorship actually affects the public conversation. It really doesn't. We all knew about Hunter Biden's life. It's all out there. What they're doing is normalizing the idea that we shouldn't be having free conversations.
Yeah.
And that will metastasize eventually to pressure on the First Amendment. And like when I was a kid, it was routine to see Nazis on talk shows and to talk about whatever you wanted. And now you're really not supposed to do that. And the most influential cultural elites are all signing up on the idea that it's dangerous to have free conversations. Not on Twitter. Twitter is what we can control right now. But once we clean up Twitter, I mean, the logic demands we then seek to control it in a wider scope. Otherwise, what are we doing?
So that's a really important point, because actually it does matter what happens on Twitter, because let's take, for instance, when you have an ideology that not just captures social media but also captures the media, then actually these sort of avenues become really important. So like if you take like gender critical feminists, women who believe that there are differences between men and women, they've been banned routinely from Twitter for a number of years now. They haven't been able to raise their concerns about gender identity ideology and have those conversations. And the media, the BBC, ITV, all of the major TV stations weren't talking about it. So Twitter was the only possible place where they could have spoken about it, but they were having their accounts deleted and censored. Yeah. So actually it does matter what Twitter lets you say and what they don't.
All right, fair enough. I don't know as much about it as you do. But in the overall, I'm much more worried about this. Like I said, it used to be liberals people are worried about a Nazi tweet.
Yeah.
Liberals used to be the ones who were fighting for the right of Nazis to march, not anywhere, march in a Jewish neighborhood. This was what liberals believed.
Yeah.
And now they're freaking out about some tweet.
Right. I mean, you got the ACLU defending Nazis to march in Skokie. And then now the ACLU has a lawyer, Chase Stranger, who works for them, saying that he's going to die on the hill of banning Abigail Schreier's book.
By the way, for our English listeners, Skokie, think Stamford Hill.
Is that right?
Isn't that where the Jews live?
Oh, I don't know. I didn't know. That's actually, I didn't.
You don't even know where the Jews live in London? Or you're not from London?
I'm not from London originally,
No.
but I didn't know that there was.
I thought it was Stamford Hill because Gina Yashire talks about it.
Oh, maybe. I mean, I'm sure she's right.
Yeah.
Golders Green is a place where there's a high
Golders Green is another one.
population. Yeah.
Now, and you know, there's a counterfactual that I worried about, or I thought about it, that, you know, with all the problems with Trump,
Yeah.
if starting with Obama, if they could have turned the Supreme Court to the left rather than to the right, and what would have been the consequence to free speech? You know, a liberal Supreme Court might very well have started to curtail some of these free speech rules that we take for granted.
Yeah.
And that, you know, if that were the actual counterfactual, I would say everything we've been through up until now has been worth it to have avoided that.
I think, and in order to avoid that kind of thing, I think there needs to be a movement within the left to reclaim the primacy of free speech. It's just not there, because when left-wing people do it, they get accused of colluding with the right. You know, and
we talk about like incitation to violence as a limit on free speech. Are there any other limits that you can think of that are necessary?
Well, even with incitement to violence, I think the threshold has to be very high. And I think, you know, in the US, you've got the Brandenburg test, so it's a very high threshold. You know, by no means did Trump violate that.
Kill Dan, kill him now.
Right, it would have to be that.
Yeah.
That even wouldn't work, because, you know, we're not going to kill him, are we? I mean, you would have to be a demagogue at a rally with lots of armed people, deliberately pointing someone saying you must kill them now, and that would just about meet the threshold for incitement to violence. So it's a very, very high threshold. That would be. Yes, that would, but no, I don't think there should be limits on speech at all. What kind of limits did you have in mind?
Well, I don't know if I had anything in mind. I thought maybe you had something.
I have the legal limits, but if I own Twitter, you're not gonna believe I'm gonna say this. If I own Twitter, I don't think I would allow misgendering. I would allow conversations about the entire issue without any question whatsoever. You could argue all about I should be able to misgender, because there's nothing to be added by.
So you would also ban
the right to publicly hurt somebody intentionally in front of millions of people, even if they can block you, your friends see it.
That's a very dangerous precedent. Because
I know,
because any kind of language can be hurtful to someone. You any kind of serious conversation.
You would also ban racial slurs then along the same line of thinking.
Certain ad hominem attacks directed at a person. Listen, any standard eventually has close calls, and somebody has to make a call. But I don't, as opposed to censoring of any conversation about anything, which I think Twitter should allow, about anything, I don't have the same sympathy for people who want to call my daughter fat and ugly on Twitter. I just don't have that.
But misgendering, for a start, is not necessarily intended to hurt. Most people use he and she pronouns, gendered pronouns, to denote biological sex. And what you're asking them to do is use language to promote an ideology they don't believe in. It's almost like demanding that people say the Ave Maria or or Our Father. You know, it's a very different. And I know a lot of people now. Most people I've known have always known trans people and always said that they will use the pronouns that the person has transitioned to out of courtesy. No one believed that they actually changed sex, but it's a polite fiction that we all engage in because we're decent people.
That's right.
But a lot of those friends I have now are now saying they won't any longer do that because the stakes are now very high, because now we have an entire movement that is very powerful telling us we need to deny reality. And so until this is defeated, they're going to be calling people by biological sex because it's very important that they do.
But-
So I would say it's actually, you could argue it's a moral good to misgender.
I hear you, but I would make the call differently if I owned Twitter. Not if I wouldn't want a law saying it. But
Yeah.
that would be an area where I would say, listen, this is my company, and this is the kind of thing I don't want on my company.
Right.
I must say that when I talk to the transgender people in the Comedy Cellar world, the right pronoun comes naturally to my lips, because when I talk to a transgender woman, I feel as though I'm talking to a woman. I mean,
It's harder if you've known them before they transition, which I have that problem with people.
Yeah.
I constantly make the mistake. But yeah, well, if you've only known somebody as a woman, then it's easy.
I don't understand what that means, that we're engaging in a polite fiction. Like,
Well, because no human being has ever changed sex. And because we use the gendered pronouns to denote biological sex for the most part, when we call someone who is biologically male she, we're doing so because we don't want them to be, because we understand that they need to present and live as the opposite sex in order to be happy, and we want to make them happy.
or we're just respecting their gender.
That's what he's saying.
That's what I'm saying.
But I mean, I think that it almost feels like, oh, we're saying this, but we don't actually believe you.
Well, we don't. You don't believe that people can physically change sex, do you?
I do believe that if if a trans woman tells me that she's a woman, then she's a woman. I mean, we're not talking about biological sex; we're talking about gender,
Well,
right?
Well, that's the question. So most people use the phrases man and woman, male and female to denote biology.
Well,
you-
they not
you-
anymore.
Most people still do. You use it to denote identity, and that's fine. That's fine as well. But it's two people using terms in different ways. That's all.
well,
That's what's going on there.
neither way is necessarily wrong. Words,
Right.
Listen,
we define words.
Right.
Words are defined based on how they are used
Exactly.
by speakers, and so
Right.
some speakers use them to denote biological sex, and some to denote
Right, that's right.
identity. And I think both are valid.
Well,
don't have
I
a
don't
problem
think
with
it's.
either, yeah.
I don't think
okay,
it's.
but for instance, you take the example of this Leah Thomas, the
Mhm.
swimmer. It's very difficult to have that conversation if you want to insist that there's that
She.
that she's a she.
But she's
Well,
not a she.
if she's a
She
she, that's the
is
end,
a she.
Well, then that's the end of the conversation, isn't it? Because it's,
Yeah,
because
it
it's sport
is.
for women.
But it shouldn't be the end. Of
but
the
it's
Well, it
obviously
is
not.
because you
No, it's
don't
not,
get
'cause
to
I'm telling
say.
you it's not.
but
Like
you-
Leah Thomas is a man.
Well, we could
Well,
also
That's
but-
why it's an issue.
No, but-
look, we could
but-
also say that she is a she, but with an asterisk that she has certain advantages.
Asterisk, however you want to.
No, but you don't
Get it.
get to
Get
say
there.
what other people are. Like, if Leah Thomas is telling you that she's a woman, then she's a woman.
No.
Does that extend to things beyond gender? Can I tell
Well-
you I'm fat? Can I? I mean,
I
listen,
mean, you can
listen,
tell me whatever you want.
You only bring this out of me because I don't really agree with what you're saying, but I'm on your side about this, which I already expressed. I'm very, very sensitive to this issue, mostly because I really came to this when I saw certain, like that documentary. Walsh, was that the guy who did the
Nat
documentary?
Walsh.
Yeah. I didn't see that documentary, but I saw a video he did where the story that he was reading.
Yeah.
And just the vibe of mocking with kids in the audience. I said, this is something that's like, I kind of agree with where they're coming from, but I don't want to be associated with what I feel is a meanness.
No, neither do I.
Yeah.
But I think there is a moral prerogative to acknowledge that Leah Thomas is male, given that Leah Thomas has been beating women to the top level of the podium, which is an immoral act. And then it becomes important. It doesn't become important if we're sitting with Leah Thomas having a drink, and I would happily use whatever pronouns are required or wanted. But when it comes to someone who is actually is in a sports category they shouldn't be in, and that has implications, then I think there is a moral prerogative to identify the reality in that situation.
So everything we're saying now should be on Twitter. But if we were talking about Leah Thomas and Dan said, I say, Dan, please don't say he. That would
Why?
be.
Because that's
because
his decision. I mean, when we start compelling speech of others,
it's my show. That's
Well, fine. There we go. So that's fine.
because it doesn't represent. It would like I wouldn't be comfortable with it, and I don't feel it's constructive. I think it's mean. I get it. I get what you're saying.
Wait, so what moral responsibility do we have when misgendering people actually is dangerous and it puts people's lives at risk, which it does, right?
it doesn't.
Of course it does. Of course it does. In certain neighborhoods.
Give me an example of when.
So in going on public transportation late at night and
Yeah.
a trans woman is trying to pass, quote unquote,
Yeah.
and she gets beaten within an inch of her life because somebody says that
because
she-
somebody tweeted something.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, there are multiple
Well,
examples.
yeah,
I mean, I know people that this has happened to, right?
Well, that's a crime. But people attacking people is a crime. It's nothing to do with what language people are using.
Well, certainly people physically attacking people is a crime, but
Yeah.
don't you have, isn't there sort of some ethical or moral ground to stand on that's saying, so you,
You know, not to create an atmosphere of hatred.
I'm just trying to. I'm just trying to.
well, and
understand
also
your-
physical danger, not
Let,
just,
let him answer.
Well, no, I'm trying to understand your point. Am I right? I just want to make sure that I'm getting you right. Are you saying that when people misgender people online and that kind of thing, they cultivate the kind of atmosphere within which violence flourishes? Is that the point you're making?
it's no, that wasn't the exact point I'm making, but I do agree with that. I think that if you have somebody who's going to work, let's say at a Walmart,
Yeah.
and they are going as the gender that they identify as in some small town in Alabama,
Yeah.
and then that person is,
Okay, Periel, can we let's take it away from the trans thing for a second? And
well,
let's take,
I'm not the one who
no, no,
brought the
no,
trans thing
Hold
up.
on, let's take it to something that you and I could speak of with and be less of a target to somebody listening. I believe that people should be able to tweet whatever they want about the Holocaust having not happened. What do you think of that?
I'm not.
Everything you're saying could
But just don't call me a Hebe.
just, and not only that, you would probably like it. Years ago when we first started doing our debates at the Comedy Cellar, I wanted my next debate to be whether the Holocaust actually happened or not.
Okay.
And everybody told me I was crazy, and I eventually didn't do it. I said on the radio interview, and they're like, "Are you serious? You think it didn't happen?" I say, "No, I think it did happen, but I think that it would be very healthy for everybody to hear exactly what the factual basis is,
Right.
exactly what the evidence, all of it, because the answer to somebody who denies the Holocaust can't be, you know that's not true, and now
Right.
and shut up."
So I
And-
agree.
but
I
is it,
agree
but is it,
with
and
you.
this is the thing about the trans thing. It kind of betrays a lack of confidence in your position if you are afraid to let people debate it. If you really are sure that what you're saying is right,
I don't think you're saying that people shouldn't debate it.
I'm not saying that people shouldn't debate it. I'm just saying that people should respect the pronouns that if somebody says that they are a certain gender, then
Alright.
that's what it is.
But I take the liberal view on that. I think anyone should be able to identify however they like and live the life however they want. I've always taken that view. But I really draw the line at compelling other people to use language they don't want to use. I mean, for instance, if I married my partner and said, this is my husband, but a fundamentalist Christian refused to call him my husband, I shouldn't be able to, by law, insist that that person uses that language, because I think compelled speech is very, very dangerous. And when you set the precedent for any one example, that can spread, that can go anywhere, depending on who's in charge.
are you worried? I hear what you're saying, but are you worried that some of the power of these new technologies are uncharted ground? The ability to bring millions of people all together to focus on one person, to bully them in some way,
Yeah.
whatever it is unprecedented, and it's scary, and then it exists online forever. All these things, there's a little humility that I think is required there. I'm not saying you're wrong, but this is not the 1970s where you could say something and it would be in the paper. I've talked about it, and the paper goes in the garbage the next day, and everybody forgets about it. And you move. Somebody who really singles somebody out for some sort of hateful language, this can be brought to bear on that person in a way that we've never dealt with in the history of the world.
Yeah.
And it's scary, and at least it requires us, even if we come to the same conclusion, we have to retrace our steps on that. We have to.
What do you mean by retrace our steps?
Retrace all the reasons that we thought this was okay.
Well, no, because there's never going to be a situation where I would say one person in charge gets to decide which opinions are hateful and which opinions are not. That's very, very dangerous. I mean, if you take the example of Galileo, he was committing hate speech in his day. That was hate speech. And, your position then would be that the Inquisitors were right to keep him under house arrest.
No, of course not.
No, but it's the same thing. I mean, like,
Right.
because there's never going to be a situation where you can have an infallible censor. That doesn't exist. So
No.
just on a point of principle, I don't think you can have that.
You can never have an
And the best way to deal with bad ideas is to talk about them. And the Holocaust is a very good example. When David Irving went to prison for Holocaust denial in Austria, that created a martyrdom around him, a sheen of glamour. It suggested that maybe there was a point to what he was saying because people were trying to silence him. What actually defeated him was when the historian Richard Evans took his historical case apart, demolished it, dismantled it. And by doing so, no one can seriously now credit him with any kind of validity. And that was the way to deal with
All
it.
right, what about this? And I know slippery slopes are real. So we do have an incitement exception. I think you agree with the incitement exception.
To a point, but I hold it very, very high.
To a point.
Yeah.
And yet, there'll never be an infallible determination of whether something was incitement or not. There will be close calls, and people will disagree. The Supreme Court will vote 5-4. It was incitement or it wasn't.
Yeah.
Incitement is to protect, and there certainly are levels of psychological damage. And I understand what you're thinking already, but the fact is there are certain levels of psychological damage which are comparable to what we are trying to prevent by having rules against incitement. There are. Maybe even more hurtful. Like I could imagine people say, I'd rather be punched in the nose than go through what I went through on Twitter.
Well, no one's denying that words can be hurtful or can have an emotional impact. No one's denying that. But it's absolutely impossible to legislate against that, right? You could even go so far as to say, well, hurtful words create stress, cause cancer, cause death. I mean, you could go that far.
But I'm not even asking about legislation. I'm just saying I think Twitter ought to, in good faith, try to have some kind of standard that can distinguish between debates of ideas and actual singling somebody out for abuse.
Well, also Twitter needs to create an environment that.
But I respect your opinion. I'm thinking out loud in a certain way, but that's my
that
inclination.
Twitter needs to create an environment as a business wherein users will be comfortable there. So, I mean, they don't want to create an environment that's so hostile that users will flee.
Yeah, but some perfectly innocuous, legitimate views are interpreted as being hostile because we're all human beings with different ideas about the world.
Well, so Twitter's got its work cut out for it.
Well, I would say the best solution, surely the best solution is just to have each user determine what they want to read and what they don't read. They have a block function for a reason. I didn't need Kanye West to be ditched because he posted that swastika Israeli flag, because I can just block him and I never have to see it again. Problem solved. The implication by Twitter banning him is that all these people need to be protected, and they need to be protected by some plutocrat in Silicon Valley. No, they don't. We can all take our own responsibility for what we read and what we don't read.
Okay, I'm going to use a bad word here, but imagine one day on Twitter, Andrew Doyle faggot is trending, you know?
It has been. Well, no,
I apologize.
People have called me stuff like that. I got called a sodomite once, which I quite enjoyed. It's kind of biblical.
And you have maybe the disposition to handle it. But if it
Not
were
really.
my
I block everyone.
Man up!
I block everyone who does. I just block them.
Yeah, but you block them, but you can't. But you're not going to be insulated from it. You're going to know about it.
Yeah.
And whatever. Okay, I think we've exhausted this topic. It's
Wait,
quite an interesting topic.
It is. Can you? You have to bring up the Twitter though, because I just discovered it and we were cracking up.
Oh, we're some of his tweets.
Okay.
So I want to ask you one more question. Is the following true? It's very important what happens in America because the rest of the world will line up a certain distance to the right of whatever America's rules on free speech. Whatever the gravitation of the First Amendment, the gravitational force is not just on America. It really controls how far the rest of the Western world can go on this issue. Nobody will separate themselves too far from America's absolute free speech. If America were to move where England was, England and France would move further in that direction, in my opinion. Am I wrong?
True or false?
I don't quite understand what you mean. Do you mean that laws in England follow the precedent of America?
I'm saying America is so powerful as a cultural leader that other Western nations will only go so far in their latitude of punishing speech because they will not want to be seen as being that far away from the American standard. That if the American standard were to move where England is now, that would now free England to move even further to the right, be even more free with their
Well,
punishments.
I have no idea. I have no idea.
You get my point. 'Cause America is an anchor here. America does not allow any rules on speech. Certainly that impacts what Germany does on speech.
Does it? I mean, Germany. I mean, there's a book by Paul Coleman called Censored, which actually reproduces in facsimile form all of the hate speech laws across Europe. Were those developed as a reaction to America? Or
No, I think they're hemmed in by America.
I don't.
You don't know.
I wouldn't have thought so. I think these things have developed out of all. I mean, our unwritten constitution and laws have a history that goes back to the Magna Carta and to our own particular history.
France outlawed the hijab, right?
But that's to do with their laissez-faire, their secularism, which is
Right. I'm saying an example. This was considered outrageous in America. I guess what I'm saying, if America didn't have constitutional protections that would not allow us to outlaw the hijab, I think France would be way freer to go to town on what they'd like to do in terms of regulating religious expression in France.
I don't think European countries care what America do.
No? Okay. You would know better. Go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I don't think Andrew's in accord with you on America's influence.
We'll cut his answer out.
It's not live then. Well, that's fine. It's your platform, so you can send to me all you like.
So you want okay. So tell the listeners about Titania
Yeah, I thought
McGrath.
it was Titiana. I read it wrong. I mean, for years I've been reading it as Titiana.
Yeah, me too.
And Tatiana I've had a lot, and so I a lot of people mispronounce it, particularly in America. And I'm surprised because Titania is a major character of Midsummer Night's Dream, and Shakespeare's very popular over here.
Yeah.
So I would have thought people would.
You're being sarcastic?
No.
No. But
Well,
she's
Shakespeare is
illiterate.
popular amongst a certain
Milieu.
relatively
She's illiterate. Is that what you just said?
No, I said you're a
narrow-
literary major.
narrow segment of the population.
But everyone knows.
No, everyone
obviously.
doesn't.
Don't
know.
they?
No,
Well,
not
that's
at
not-
all. And
You're
I'm an
grossly over. You're
Now,
giving
especially-
Americans a lot of credit.
especially-
Doesn't everyone study Shakespeare at school?
but not Midsummer Night's Dream.
Don't they?
I mean, if we study everything, we study Julius Caesar, Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet, and Macbeth. Those are the ones that I read in high school.
Can you read Shakespeare? I tried to read Hamlet recently.
I have to read slowly and ploddingly. I can't understand.
No matter how slowly I read, I'm also reading Bleak House by Dickens. I cannot understand what I'm reading. I buy annotated
can't read-
versions.
Well, Bleak House is great.
It's great, but there's so many references there. And if you buy the annotated version and you see what the references are, you realize how much you're missing. And you can't possibly know this stuff. You have to be alive at that time.
Yeah.
It's referencing current events. It's referencing verse from the Bible that everybody knew back then that, we don't know.
But at least it's English that we are familiar with, where Shakespeare, the actual vocabulary is different.
It's on a continuum, yeah. But anyway, so
Wait,
you,
so
it's
is
fun,
this
isn't it?
picture of Titania? Is this the actress that you
No.
write for? No. Okay.
No, that is not a real person.
Okay.
That is I googled smug woman, and I got an image, and then I adapted the image. A friend of mine who's good on computers, we added the glasses, we made her neck a bit shorter. So it's a composite of various features from various women. So it's not a real person.
Okay.
So you have an alter ego, Titania McGrath, who is a deep satire of wokeism and you had how many followers?
I don't know what it is. now.
752.5 thousand.
Yeah, that's what it is now. But
Not bad.
it's not bad
at all.
It's so funny.
Oh, it's amazing.
Oh, thank you.
And you were booted off Twitter at one time?
Oh yeah. So she's been suspended many times.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there were a couple of 7-day suspensions, a few 3-day suspensions, and then a permanent suspension. I got an email saying, this is it, it's over.
Was that to get that many followers? Is that a gradual process, or were there a few really big names that retweeted you and pushed?
Dan's trying to figure out how to get his followers up.
Well, no, the big.
Well, the most followers I ever got was when what the hell's that guy's name that was big on Twitter?
Simon Cowell.
No. The guy that used Twitter. He was a comic and he used Twitter. Andrew Donald.
I know.
Irish name. I forgot his name, but he retweeted something, and that's most of my followers.
Oh, so go
really
ahead,
came
answer
from
the
that,
question,
but-
go ahead.
Oh well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I did it at first to entertain myself. Also
How long has
some of
she
it.
been around?
Oh,
Oh, 2018. It says.
2018.
Okay.
Right. So,
I'm becoming an expert.
well, what happened was a few major people on Twitter, people with a lot of followers, liked her, started amplifying her. That is the way you get more followers, really, is when people with a lot of followers retweet you. But really, what really boosted it was when she was permanently banned, because it was a permanent ban. But then because there were 3 or 4 celebrities who followed her, they kicked up a fuss, and so Twitter reinstated her. And it was very weird because I thought, okay, well, that's it. She's gone. And then all of a sudden she was back. And then she wrote an article for some online thing talking about her oppression, or how she'd been oppressed by being kicked off Twitter. I think it was called I Now Know What Nelson Mandela Felt Like. Because she'd been off Twitter for like 48 hours. And after that, Streisand effect, you see. So after that, I got an extra something like 30,000 followers that night once she was back, because they'd drawn attention to it by banning it.
Right,
Which
so
is
to
another
your
reason.
You
point.
call it the
Right.
Streisand effect?
The Streisand effect is when you, by trying to censor something, you make it hugely popular.
Yeah.
It was when Barbara Streisand was trying to sue a photographer who'd photographed her Malibu home and published it, and she didn't want anyone knowing where her home was. And by doing so, everyone knew about it, and the photograph went wild all over the world.
Well,
So
that's
it's
what
called the
happened when
Streisand
Billy Joel, when they tried to ban Only the Good Die Young.
Mm.
The Catholic Church was pissed because he was talking about, the lyrics of the song, Only the
Yeah.
Good Die Young, the Catholic girl, whatever he was saying. But
Catholic girls start much
yeah,
too
yeah,
late.
yeah.
Yeah.
Again, it happened.
Yeah,
Any
but
book,
so anyway, that's
you know,
what pushed that song into
The stratosphere.
The stratosphere, I guess.
it does.
And
You try and ban
Also,
it.
Dr. Seuss, right? All of those books that they were recently.
Oh yeah, they all started selling out. That's right.
That's right.
Yeah. Good Periel. That's 2 today. Portugal. And
But is the Streisand
Very
effect
good.
something that you came up with, or is that what it's called?
No, that is
no,
what
no.
it's called. Yeah, that's like a thing.
You never heard that, Dan?
No, I call it the Billy Joel effect.
So is this like a Sacha Baron Cohen thing? Like, does everybody know she's fake or created, or not really?
So it's a strange one because, of course, I was never open about it. I didn't even tell my best friends that I was doing this for years.
No.
So I could just do whatever I want. And then I got a phone call one day from my agent who'd been talking to a publisher who'd been asking, do you know anyone who writes satire against the social justice movement? And so my agent phoned me up saying, do you know of anyone who might do this? And I said, well, I've got a character that does this. And he was following her, not knowing it was me.
Hilarious.
So then I wrote a book, the first Titania book. And what had happened is, the week that it was being published, some investigative journalist at the Sunday Times or the Times worked out it was me. I mean, she'd been like comparing quotations that Titania had done to things I'd written in articles. She'd been phoning my friends. It was really in depth. And so I was sort of outed as being Titania McGrath the week of the publication. And that made the book sell really well.
Amazing.
Which was really great. It looked calculated, but I'm not that smart. It wasn't like that. And so then people knew it was me. And then I got a lot of abuse for doing, because, she really annoyed a lot of people. So, but since then, what's weird is there's been all this publicity and people, I've been talking about it on various podcasts and things, but still every tweet I do, and I don't tweet as much as from her now because I've been doing it a long time. It's not my priority at the moment, but there's still always people getting angry at it and they think it's real. Even now, every tweet, there'll be someone complaining and saying, who is this woman? And because it's close enough to what they do say.
Right.
How
the thing.
awesome is your life, by the way? Like, you ever wake up? No, I'm serious. You ever wake up and say, listen, I'm doing everything I want to do. I can write books about what I'm thinking about. I can tweet with this funny character. I can do stand-up comedy. I'm making a living. I can go buy a suit. At the last minute.
yeah, sure.
No, honestly, like, what a great life you're carving out for
Are you
yourself.
saying I'm very pampered?
No, I mean it with all sincerity. Like, do you ever wake up and say, and picture, this is fantastic?
But do you have love in your life?
Well,
Despite it all.
we all have a certain darkness, don't we? But, I think, of course, I'm incredibly fortunate. I think most of us are.
And,
you
to be gay and living in the 21st century as opposed to even 30 years ago.
Right, exactly. Yeah. No, I need to constantly remind myself of that. You're right, because we're all kind of prone to wallow, aren't we? And to think we've got it.
Well,
bad,
but Noam's life is not too far behind. Other than the one thing you have that Noam doesn't have is, I guess, relative youth.
you get to run your own comedy club and do that.
Oh, I'm very happy with my life
but
too.
Noam, for the past 30 years, his life has been music, babes, and falafel.
This is I think about this a lot vis-a-vis people. I had a certain, I don't want to call it a soft spot, but there was a certain non-political way that I looked at Trump. I said, this motherfucker is living a life. Like, this guy has done everything he's wanted to do, and just when you think he's done, I'm going to be president. And then he wins the presidency. Just as a story of somebody getting everything out of life, this is a remarkable story.
But we do need to be a bit cautious insofar as, there is a correlation between serious depression and wealth. And wealthy people tend to be the most depressed. And
Is
so
that true?
Yes. And so therefore, even
Where
someone
does wealth begin? At what net worth number do you say wealth begins for
Well,
purposes of that?
relative,
Anything
isn't it?
more than me.
It's relative, I suppose. I mean, everyone in this country is wealthy on a global scale, but
Well, yeah.
I think it doesn't matter how rich you are, how much you're getting the things you want. Like, there's something about human beings that we always kind of look on the downside.
Is it the
Yeah,
wealth that
some
creates
people.
depression, or depressed people somehow get wealthy because they have a personality?
But
that-
I've known people who've become very, very successful in their industry, and particularly in comedy, and they've never been more unhappy. And they were more happy when they were struggling.
so it's the
and,
wealth
you know-
itself that created.
I don't
depression.
know. I just think it's a mistake to assume that success in your career or relationships or anything necessarily equates to a happy person, because it often doesn't.
I would comment on that the following. Based on having had a few periods where I was working on something and saw it to success, that period of waking up in the morning and having all that drive to,
Yeah.
from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep, you're working on that thing. And that lasted me for many years on some things I was doing. These are actually the happiest times.
Yeah.
Once
When you're
it's
striving for something.
Yes, once it's success, not the wealth, but once that is done, like now in the Comedy Cellar, you think I get the most pleasure. No, it's actually now it's the opposite. Now I'm always worried about losing it.
Right.
I'm not building it anymore. I'm always in a defensive posture. What if this goes wrong? What if that's not fun.
Yeah.
That's not fun at all. I'm not depressed, but it's not nearly as fun as the ride up.
Well, yeah. I mean, I wonder if Seinfeld was happiest when he was just a stand-up comic, and maybe at the beginning of his show when things were, and then because for the past 30 years he's just been a very wealthy guy on top of the world, but there's no upward movement.
And then he has to deal with Larry David being so successful at the same time. That must bug him.
Well,
if he's human.
It probably does.
Yeah.
Because Larry, he's probably still richer than Larry, but Larry is more comedically relevant.
People put way too much emphasis on money.
Well, that's what I just said. Larry
Well,
is
it's
more
easy to say
comedically
that.
important. Larry has a show. Curb Your Enthusiasm is a still relevant show, and Jerry really is not comedically relevant.
I'm sure Musk has not had this much fun in years.
Right. And that's why he tweets the way he does.
He's getting and owning Twitter. Like, why would he do it? Doesn't he know his business? He doesn't give a shit. He wants to enjoy himself, and this is he must be getting the time of his life out of this. And I respect that. I think that's you only live
who
once.
knows?
You only live once.
I think it's also when you accomplish something really big and then it's over, you feel empty,
Well,
right?
is that like after Stupid?
Yeah. Well, stupid. I'm still trying
her
to.
show.
I'm still trying to make that successful. I finished creating it, and that took 2 years. But it's true. After that launch party, Stupid, or Stupid set on the stoop of the world famous Comedy Cellar is an animated short series, that I host.
You had the
and
time of your life making it, right?
It took so long. It was so hard. It was fun and exciting, and now it's done, and we're trying to take it to the next level.
Right.
But like you feel like.
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
feel like that after you finished writing your book, Dan?
Dan
There was
has
a sense
novel
of
that
there
you
was a
should
sense
read.
of law.
Excellent.
Okay.
Well, thank you.
No, really excellent. I'm
Yeah.
not.
I will read it.
Well, thank you.
Periel wrote a book too. 2 books. I haven't read them.
I read these.
Well, there was a sense of loss, a sense
Right.
of, my companion, which I get the same sense sometimes after I finish reading a book that I like. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh, my friend is, I don't have my friend anymore.
All right, we have to wrap up.
Anyhow,
I want to say this. The battle is not for free speech on Twitter, in my opinion. The battle is to maintain the social norm that values free speech.
Yes.
And we used to have that, and it's decaying, it's corroding, and it's very, very dangerous, in my opinion, because once people forget that they believe this, everything will slide in the opposite direction. And and I'll say one more thing: the public-private distinction. It's real, and at times it's dispositive. On the other hand, we didn't have so much respect for that distinction when people were racist. People were making that was the argument that people hid behind when they wanted to be racist and treat black people in a certain way. It's my right to treat black people any way I want. I don't have to let them in my business. And we found our way around it through kind of an expansionary use of the Commerce Clause, which now seems like, common knowledge and cliche. But at the time, a lot of very responsible legal scholars said, come on, they didn't mean that when they wrote the Commerce Clause, right?
Yeah.
It was not an originalist view of the Commerce Clause. I'm happy they did expand it, but I don't know if it was actually sound legal reasoning.
Yeah.
But the country is way better off for finding a way to violate that public-private distinction. I don't think we want the public-private distinction to be violated when it comes to speech. I'm only making the point that once people decide that speech is bad, they will find clever ways to jump that guardrail.
Yeah.
It was righteous when they found that clever way when it came to civil rights. It will not be righteous when they find that way to jump the guardrail when it comes to free speech, but they will find a way. And if that becomes the consensus of the country, it eventually will be reflected in the justices that are appointed to the Supreme Court, and we will lose that. So that's my feeling about it. You agree with what I just said?
I do. I think we are in a time when the notion that words are violence is widely accepted. We're in a time when creative people are mistrusted because artists and writers and comedians are seen. There is a responsibility or perceived responsibility to be putting out the correct social message. And all of this is based on a fallacy, the fallacy that the public is influenced by the media it consumes and act on cue according to the films they watch or the books they read or the plays they see or the comedians they listen to. And we know that's not true. There have been 6 decades of research into media effects theory, and it's been debunked many, many times.
Is this to say that commercials are a waste of money for companies?
Well, it's very hard to persuade anyone to buy anything. The reason why commercials work is because people are already predisposed to the item that you're selling. It's the reason why there's all sorts of studies into propaganda that show that propaganda doesn't really work unless people are predisposed. And in fact, when you attempt propaganda when they're not predisposed, it has the opposite effect. So we've bought into these myths, and there's so much studies into this, so I don't understand why we have bought into those myths. And we need to reclaim that idea, that distinction between words and violence. They're not the same thing. It's an important distinction that we have to retain, because once you decide that words can be a form of violence, you can decide which words are hateful and which words should be banned. And they might not necessarily be harmful. They might just be the words that you don't want to hear.
Well, and I mean, ideas are violence. That's where it's going now. I mean,
Well, also, it's used to preemptively justify actual violence. When groups like Antifa say it's perfectly fine for me to hit a Trump voter over the head with a bike lock because that person's words and ideas are violent to me, and therefore me hitting them is a form of self-defense. This is very dangerous stuff.
Or how about when the consensus of people working at the New York Times is that the editor should be fired for simply running an editorial about, how to control riots.
Well, quite. But the New York Times is now an activist publication, so it doesn't really have credibility as a journalistic publication.
But I guarantee you the New York Times was writing editorials in favor of the Nazis marching in Skokie 30 years ago.
Well, of course. But that's the problem I identify now with the left.
Yeah.
That's what they've let go. They've this fundamental principle that they should be embracing and used to embrace. And I think it's a real tragedy that they've let it go, because now people do perceive it, because they hear right-wing figures defending free speech. Now they think it's a right-wing
Also,
thing.
it's fun to engage with people who drastically disagree with you.
It's great fun. I used to enjoy that a lot. And now it doesn't happen now, because the friends of mine who politically disagree with me are no longer my friends. They won't talk to me. Whereas back when I was at university, we used to stay up all night arguing passionately and disagreeing and getting annoyed with each other even sometimes. But it was fun, and we would laugh it off the next day. That was part of the experience. And now there's an expectation of conformity, which I think isn't good for human relationships and friendships even.
And by the way, the arrogance, they want to like ban a tweet that like 40 or 50% of the country agrees with. I mean, it's almost proof positive that this is simply the point of view of the censor, because it's not like 1%, kind of where this is really an outlier position. Only a crazy person would believe this. We shouldn't allow this. I mean, it's like every scenario, every hypothetical is broken by the example of Nazis. But this is not Nazi stuff that people are taking down off Twitter.
No,
this is pretty mainstream, reasonable minds can differ stuff.
Before we wrap up, there's some controversy on Twitter as to how old you are. It says you're either born in 78 or, sorry, not Twitter, Wikipedia.
Oh, well,
You were either born
Wikipedia
in
doesn't get
78
anything
or
right.
79.
Yeah.
Now that's
So 44,
well, which is
45.
it?
I'm not going to tell them. I want them to be mistaken.
43.
Hilarious.
44, 43. Yeah.
Oh, no. But I mean, like, what's the difference between 43, 44, 45? No difference. But I quite like the fact that Wikipedia gets everything wrong about me, and I want to keep it.
So you were not born in Derry, Northern Ireland.
No, I was not.
That will be done.
I believe you probably put your own Wikipedia.
No, I don't.
Disinformation.
That sounds like a
I
Titania.
used to try and like with the birthplace. I used to try and change it, and then it would change it back again and say you don't know. so I'm like, well, okay.
Well, were you at least born in Northern Ireland?
No,
I'll be darned.
My friend Harry Enton's birthday is wrong on Wikipedia as well.
All right.
they don't know anything. I mean, these things are just sort of decided.
Yeah, anybody can add anything to Wikipedia, right?
Yeah, but there are people that oversee.
There are
it.
censors.
Well,
Thank God.
But it is quite good that private information is not out there because I don't want people.
So
to
your
use my
uncle is
identity
not
or use
Eamon
my-
Mallah?
Sorry.
Your uncle is not Eamon Mallah, whoever that is?
Yeah, he is. That's right. Why have they got that? I mean, but that's a really weird. That's a really weird thing for Wikipedia to say.
Is that how
Why-
you pronounce it? Mallah?
Malach. He
okay.
was a civil rights activist and Republican activist in Northern Ireland before the Troubles, and he organised the first civil rights march that is considered the start of the Troubles. It was his. sort
I
of
will
thing,
be
but,
darned.
But there's a weird thing. Why would Wikipedia mention that?
Well, it didn't have anything else to say about your personal life, so it threw
Right.
that in there.
So they're grasping at straws here now, aren't they? They're just not any kind of vague detail they can throw down there. But
Well, but he's an interesting figure, so why not put that in?
sure.
Andrew Doyle, his
What else
book.
does it say? Like,
Oh, is it else?
does it have my height?
It says you're gay, but that's correct.
Okay.
Doyle
I'll
is
give him
gay.
that.
It's on. You went to the University of. You got a doctorate in early Renaissance poetry from the University of
A
Oxford,
doctorate. Wow.
That's almost right.
having studied at Wadham College, Oxford.
I had a doctorate in Renaissance poetry. It wasn't early Renaissance poetry.
Is that how everybody pronounces it in your country?
What,
Renaissance?
Yeah. You say Renaissance.
I play a
Renaissance.
Renaissance guitar. It's the brand of guitar I play.
Uh,
Listen, we have to go. You are.
and-
Go ahead. Sorry, Dan. Go ahead. You want to?
Andrew Doyle, his books include The New Puritans, How the Religion of Social Justice Captured the Western World, Free Speech and Why It Matters, and Titania McGrath, my first little book of intersectional activism, all I assume available where books are sold.
I'm going to say something. I think you're a great man, actually, and I think you're a tremendously important influence on what's going on now. I'm very proud to know you. I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I was very moved that you sent me that copy of your book, and
Thank you.
I want to be a constant supporter of everything that you do. You're fighting the most important battles right now. And good luck tomorrow at the Comedy Cellar. Even if that doesn't work out.
Thank you.
Honestly, there's not that many people like you out there, and it's so important. It's so important.
I will tell Louis Schaefer you said hello, but maybe you'll speak to him before I do. Anyhow, thank you, Andrew Doyle. Thank you, Periel and Noam, of course, and our dear friend Nicole, the sound wizard behind the scenes. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.